Good afternoon. We have, this is our publicity, this poetry in motion is our publicity lady, and we have a great newsletter. She puts it out. It mostly features stories about veterans, but also events. And she's going to pass around a spreadsheet. If you'd like to be on the newsletter list, we'd love to have you sign your name, and there's no obligation, so thank you, Janice Allen. We have a couple of museum members, volunteers here. Would you guys raise your hands? I'm Michael Robertson. I'm a board member of the History Museum and a volunteer, and we welcome you to this performance of Brothers and Sisters Like These. We also want to thank Brevard College for the use of this room free of charge. It means a lot to us. Would all the veterans in the room, to your best ability, if you can, stand so that we can acknowledge your service. I always like to ask, are there any other first responders in the room? We'd like to acknowledge their service as well. The Veterans History Museum is on Main Street in Brevard, right next to the courthouse. We're an all-volunteer organization, no paid staff. We just depend upon donations and grants to stay open. We have a mission, which is to honor, educate, and preserve. Of these three roles, the one that we hold dear to our hearts is honoring veterans. Most of our volunteers are either veterans or people, civilians like me, that are affected and touched by veterans and their families. My husband is a Vietnam War veteran. My dad was a navigator in the Pacific. My grandfather was a pilot in World War I. And my father's uncle was killed in action at Meuse-Argonne in 1919. Wow. At the museum, we recognize the best way to honor veterans is to listen to their stories. And that's why I'm so honored to welcome our guests today. Writing to me, writing one's deepest thoughts and feelings is extremely hard. Reading them to a group of strangers takes courage. So we want to thank you for your patriotism, your service, and your courage. So it's my privilege. It's my privilege to introduce Steve Henderson, who is, if I get this right, president of the North Carolina Veterans Writing Alliance Foundation, and Brothers and Sisters Like These. Steve, there we go.
This is a real pleasure coming to Brevard. We went to several other communities across the state. In fact, the Duck, North Carolina, rented us a bus and brought us down there, and we spoke to the people of Duck, North Carolina. If you've ever been down to see the wild horses, that's where it's at. But it was quite a movement. We spoke to Marines in Camp Lejeune, and this class that we offer, we're going to do in Wilmington. But the Department of the Navy found out about what we do, and they're asked if our writer in residence would write it for 5 weeks for Navy and Marines that are getting ready to retire. And they're going to start giving the same course that we give, because it helps so tremendously with trauma, PTSD, sexual trauma, as well as mild TBI. And so we've had a lot of young vets, especially our Iraq, Afghan vets, that have jobs now that did not have jobs, because writing has helped them with their short-term memory, which you suffer with TBI, traumatic brain injury. So we've come a long way in 6.5 years. You're going to get a real good cross-section of enlisted and officers and pilots and grunts like myself. A grunt is somebody that's in the trenches. But everybody in Vietnam most people are not aware of it. Our country has had several wars. But Vietnam veterans spent more time in combat than any other soldier in the United States service. 240 days out of a year in actual combat. As a World War II vet spent 40 days and was there a lot longer. So it's, you're gonna find that we have a Desert Storm vet here today. We've got Iraq and Afghan vets here today. And their war is a whole lot like Vietnam. But can you imagine being out in the field fighting in the morning, during the day, then coming home and Skyping with your family at night and telling them everything's fine, I didn't do anything today to put me in danger. And that's, so none of it is good. A lot of our guys, have served their nation and served very proudly. A lot of them have illnesses from Agent Orange and come in contact with chemicals and Desert Storm, as well as Iraq and Afghanistan. So this is part of our healing for these veterans, us veterans, to read you. So you are helping them to get better along. Probably some of you vets in here were workaholics for years. They say some vets are alcoholics, some are substance abusers in several different ways, but most are workaholics. And then when you retire, all that garbage comes back to your mind. It affected me, it's affected a lot of the vets here. But you're gonna get a really good cross section. I hope you enjoyed the reading. I just really want to thank the History Museum for having us here. We tried to come out here, and I talked to Michael before COVID, and then we tried to come after COVID, and then it just never worked out. But today it did, and I think you're going to be in for a real treat of what you're going to hear today. I hope it moves you like it moves me to write and to read. And I just thank you for coming. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Ron Toller, who's going to give you the order. And if anybody here is interested, any of you vets is interested in a class, we would love to do one here in Brevard if we have enough. Or you can come to another location if we don't. But we would love to do a class. I will tell you, spouses, you will see a huge difference in your significant other, your husbands, your wives, if they take this course. It works. It works. The North Carolina Arts Council has said that what we do and what art and dance has done has helped so many veterans. And we've done the dance. We really enjoyed that. But anyway, so Ron Toller.
Thank you. I'll be real quick. Stephen has covered most of the territory. We are a private foundation. We're all volunteer, as you are. And we also depend on donations for our funding. We've been very fortunate that we have been able to do the classes, and all of the classes that we do are at no cost to the veterans themselves. So with that in mind, we have 10 people lined up today to read for you. We're going to start out with 10 minutes and go from there. Thank you.
My name is Ted Dimick. I live in Black Mountain. I'm here today with my wife, my granddaughter, and her friend. And I appreciate the invitation. I served in the United States Army from 1966 to 2006. I I'm a slow learner. I was sent to Vietnam in 1969 to 1970 as a Army Field Artillery Battery Commander. I had a heavy composite battery of 8-inch 175 guns. We were very close to the Cambodian border. We could pretty much see the Ho Chi Minh Trail from where we were located. My piece is entitled What I Brought Back. I've been back from Vietnam for over 53 years, but sometimes it seems like just yesterday or last night. Even though I was a commander of a heavy artillery battery and should be used to loud noises, I still jump at unexpected bangs or loud sounds. When I enter a room, I still look for exits, bunkers. I still sit facing the entrance. I don't do crowds. I don't do fireworks or screaming kids. My wife knows my triggers. We can be in a store somewhere, and if things start getting really loud, she'll come over and grab my arm and say, "It's time to leave." I don't know how much, yeah, I appreciate that. I wear hearing aids today because of the artillery, and we jokingly refer to my hearing loss as spousal deafness, or as I like to call it, selective hearing. But I can still hear a helicopter and tell you what kind it is over a mile away. I brought back an appreciation for brotherhood. My battle buddies were my family for a year, and I stay in touch with a few. We're getting smaller in number every year. Today I sometimes can't remember what I had for lunch or why I even entered a room. But I can tell you the quadrant elevation and the deflection of numerous targets in my area of operations in Vietnam, the serial number of my M14 and my M16 rifle, the names of my drill sergeants from basic training. It's strange what we recall. As someone once said, my mind can't forget what my eyes have seen. I brought back a deeper appreciation for spouse and family. I had an idea of what spouse and family go through when someone deploys. I saw it firsthand when my dad, who was a 30-year career pilot with the Air Force, he would deploy as a pilot, and my mom had to step up and do all the fatherly things in the families that he would do if he were home. I was trained to know war, how to survive its inherent dangers, and how to lead men in battle. I married my high school sweetheart from South Georgia, who had no experience with military things, and who was suddenly thrust into a completely different lifestyle and world. When I went to Vietnam, I left a wife and a 3-month-old daughter. I knew the difference between the incoming and outgoing rounds, the ping of a grenade spoon. I became ultra aware of any strange sounds. In other words, I learned to be hyper-vigilant to things that happen during battle. Imagine spending your days and nights dreading the sound of a car door slamming, or the telephone ringing in the middle of the night, or the sight of uniformed military personnel approaching your door. Imagine doing that for 365 days and nights. My wife and daughters and other military families like them are my heroes. I also brought back a sneaky, hidden disease called Agent Orange, chronic lymphocytic leukemia. Thanks to Dow Chemicals, Dioxin, and Uncle Sam. I was diagnosed in 2008, 38 years after returning from Vietnam, and thank the good Lord, my disease remains at stage 0, called watchful waiting. We've had a few scares over the last year, but good to go. Our youngest daughter, as someone once said, quote, "Not all who lost their lives in Vietnam died there, and not all who came home from Vietnam ever left there. Our youngest daughter, Sarah, who was born in 1971 after I returned, was diagnosed in 1997 with multiple sclerosis and passed away in 2016 at the age of 44 from complications of MS. I don't hold a grudge against the government for my disease. But I feel guilty that my daughter's disease may have been caused by my exposure to Agent Orange. The VA says there's no connection. As they say, quote, "We came home and death came with us." Lastly, I brought back a deep gratitude to the men and women of our armed services and all their sacrifices, then and now. I will always stand and salute the flag. I will always thank God for those who are willing to stand on the wall and guard our country and what it stands for. Thank you.
It's going to be a little tough to follow that.
I'm sorry, I'm real sorry. Could you speak a little louder?
Sure.
People back here can hear.
Sure.
We heard you great, Ted, but a little louder to the other
Absolutely.
mics. Thank you.
Hello to everybody, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to come here and listen to us speak about our military experience. And especially thanks to the college for providing this facility, to the organizers and the volunteers that make this event possible. It's because of their devotion and commitment to veterans that we are here today. My name is Emiliano, formerly known as Sergeant E, and today simply known as E, like A, B, C, D. I grew up in New York City, close to the Twin Towers, and which I could see clearly from my house, from my apartment windows. And in 2001, I was no longer living in New York City, and I was returning home from the Army recruiter, where I had just enlisted as airborne infantry for the 82nd Airborne Division here at Fort Bragg/Liberty, here in the eastern part of the state. I literally just walked in, and before I could put my bag on the grounds, I watched on TV that the towers were being attacked. It was September 11th, 2001. It was at that moment that I knew that my life would drastically change. After basic training, infantry training, in the airborne school, my first duty station was with the Parachute Infantry Regiment at Fort Bragg. And 2 months later, my second duty station was Forward Operating Base Summerall, Fallujah, Iraq. And don't worry, I have the DD-214 to prove it all. Sounds too crazy. So the very first story that they had us write was where I'm from, and that's what I've chosen to speak today. Where I'm from matters no more to me. Instead, what I'm from is what matters. My existence is but a mere line of a chapter of a book among millions in a library collecting dust, accessible only to the second row shelf via a rolling ladder. A ladder that has only been used once to place the book in its placeholder and never to be used again. What I'm from is the same thing that you come from, the most basic forms of elemental chemistry. The sun, water, earth, and air. A ball of consolidated energy, denser than anything the universe has ever been able to compartmentalize in its fabric of time and space. All of humanity laid within that core, and with its explosion came the universe we know now. What created that energy remained academic to me, and not as important as its intent and its implications for. I come from the same place you did. You are my brother, You're my sister. You're the animal that nourishes me and the plant that feeds me. You're the person that tried to kill me, and I'm the person that tried to kill you. I come from the air you breathe out, and you come from the air I breathe in. We are one. I am from the earth that has nourished those before me, and to the earth shall I return to continue to nourish the future generations. I'm from the same place that all of us want and need, the need to flourish and thrive, to have a sense of purpose, to create a family, to leave a legacy, no matter how small. The things we have in common are much more than those that separate us. I am from you, and you are from me. That is where I'm from.
Thank you everybody for being here today. My name is Stacy Lutzenberger. I live in Fairview, and I'm a U.S. Army retired major. So I deployed to the Persian Gulf War in '90, and then did 2 long tours in Iraq. So the title of this is the year 1990 Mentor. His large hand of an unspoken life clenched my 22-year-old hand as we walked slowly in silence. The year was 1990. I was an American soldier who was befriended by his daughter to join their Christmas Eve dinner, as my friends and my husband had already deployed to the Persian Gulf War from Germany. We made our way over cold generations of hand-hewn cobblestones as snow fell ever so lightly. I remember his thick black coat. I felt he was like a bear trying to protect me. We reached the German village, and in the darkness of midnight, we reached the small church, only lit by candlelight. We sat on Bavarian-worn church pews that could handle any burden and any joy. We sat in silence as prayers and wishes of Christmas joy went unheard by us. This man whom I just met hours earlier during Christmas Eve dinner, a World War II veteran who survived as a German prisoner and prisoner of war in Russia, began to quietly say, Krieg ist schlecht. Krieg ist schlecht. War is difficult. War is difficult. His hand continued to clench mine, giving me every hope that I would not experience his own memories and terror of the combat of men. I trembled a little from the cold and more from my own thoughts that I knew the next day I too would be forever changed as a young U.S. Army soldier off to my generation's war.
My name is Alton Whitley. I have the notorious distinction, I was reminded of this morning, of having read too long once upon a time. So I brought something to really read from today to keep me on track. I graduated from Clemson University after growing up in South Carolina in 1968, May the 4th of 1968, the month, the worst month of the Vietnam War. Almost 2,500 Americans were killed that month of the 58,000 that were lost. I came home from my first tour flying the F-100 Super Sabre, where I did close air support primarily for the Army, in some cases for the Marines, to some of the most sad and unbelievable times of my life. I can say this in front of my lovely wife, who I had known for years prior to this, but I came home to find out that my then wife, my first wife, had turned into a war protester. I was pissed. I wanted to go back and kill me some more gooks. I was livid. I went back and I volunteered for the most dangerous mission I possibly could in the United States Air Force at that time. I wanted to go back and do search and rescue. I wanted to go in and escort, to go in and find the downed pilots, escort the helicopters in, pick them up and get them out. It was a very dangerous mission. I transitioned to the A-7D Corsair, trained for that mission, and was in the first group to go over a permanent change of station. And unfortunately, it happened to be about the time that the war started to really crank down. I say unfortunately because I was pissed. I got over that over time, during the second tour. I came home, chased down this lovely lady who I'd known for a long time, and we've been married for over 48 years now. Raised two wonderful children. One of them is working a 12-on, 12-off shift right now as she is serving at Charleston Air Force Base in the 315th Military Airlift Wing. They've been doing that for about 10 days straight now. We're deploying Monday to Charleston to take care of two grandkids. His dad, even though he's a civilian, works primarily for the DOD, and he's all over the place doing all sorts of stuff. So what's going on in the world affects us all to this day. The last thing I'll say before I read is this lady and I pulled into Las Vegas, Nevada on the 17th of August of 1990. That evening, the next morning, we had our change of command. I took over the 37th Fighter Wing. I hadn't been in that unit for 5 years, but many years prior, I'd been the first guy to fly the F-117 stealth fighter in that wing. That wing had been fully developed by the time I went back. 4 hours after I took command, I got my deployment order, and I left that night. I got home the 1st of April. I left her on the 17th of August, and I got back on the 1st of April. So you're talking about spouses and families being affected, you bet they are. They have it just as rough as we do, I think, in some cases. But that little girl, herself was very busy today. Amelia, I gotta tell you, mine is where I'm from. Talk a little bit about where I'm going. I've often heard the comment, I know where you're coming from, but the words, I know where you're going, I've heard from almost none. Where I'm from influences both where I'm going and where I am, but along the way I've always worked hard because I gave a damn. I can only determine where I'm going after I acknowledge where I'm from. My family started as Tar Heels, but my folks and I, Sandlappers, we did become. But the rest of our kin remained north of the Carolinas border. They ate our peaches and loved our beaches, and even blamed us, sort of. It is safe to say I came from a loving and hardworking mom and dad who were determined all their life to give me chances they never had. They were kids in a deep depression and teens during the global war. They were pawns in conflicts fought mostly far beyond our own shore. My dad was just a kid when he climbed on an overcrowded troop boat, but eventually took him to battles in a war of which he would never gloat. He served honorably, earning a CIB and a Purple Heart in a foreign lands afar. He was wounded in World War II in Italy and forever limped, carrying a lifelong scar. The world I came from in today's environment are much different places. My childhood was simple, and I was part of the effort to integrate the races. My folks started poor, worked hard all their life, and never had very much. but they were happy and proud to raise 2 boys with love and a magic touch. My teenage years remained simple, and many good memories and lots of glee. I had all I needed and did without little that was really necessary for me. I grew up with lots of kids, much like me, on a mill hill in South Carolina. People had jobs, we could worship in public, and life could not be much finer. I'm from a world where your word and commitment were seen as a contract. If I told you something or shook your hand, my promise was to you intact. I'm from a time when teachers taught and disciplined us because they cared. If I didn't follow instructions or listen, neither advice nor rod were spared. I'm from a mother that worked long and hard on a textile mill production line. One day her bosses tested her and were surprised to find she had a great mind. She went from folding and packing and racing the clock and using her hands to programming futuristic computers in languages called COBOL and Fortran. I'm from a dad whose hard work earned him respect as a supervisor and boss. And when his time came and he finally retired, it was for many a great loss. I'm from a man who struggled in his youth but worked hard each and every day, making sure his boys knew what was important as they found their own way. I'm from an era when we took for granted most of us had all we really needed. Our own behavior and effort usually determined the way we were often treated. I'm from a time when being an American and knowing our history made me proud. Yet today, so many don't get it and walk around with their head in a cloud. I'm from a place where all families knew the true meaning of the 4th of July. As kids, we pledged our allegiance to Old Glory each day with a little misty eye. I'm from a place where as a kid, I saw contrails crisscrossing the southern sky. Those white clouds trailing the plane made me often question how and why. I'm from a time when college was a way to avoid going to the ugly Vietnam War. Not doing my duty never crossed my mind, yet little did I know what was in store. I'm from a place where the Blue Ridge owns its greatness and the tigers play. I found something in those Clemson hills that really helped me find my way. I'm from a time when we all seem to cherish our red, white, and blue. Now, it's different when I see so many seem to neither respect nor love it as I do. I'm from a time when so many of us got called to serve in Vietnam without any choice. It was a place thousands of parents never heard their child's final crying voice. Both my country and family were built from scratch by poor, hard-working people. Sadly, we can no longer worship without fear in sanctuaries below our steeple. I'm from a series of wars that I never started and some that never seemed to finish. Lost national treasure and our dead and injured warriors often makes my pride diminish. We're all pretty smart in our hearts. We really know what needs to be done. But rather than sit down and work things out, we all too frequently resort to a gun. I'm from a country that struggles constantly 24/7 each and every day to help veterans asking, where am I going, as they seek their way. I search every day for where I'm going. Like other vets in my healing group, I've come to know. If you're still searching too, I urge you to join a similar group to help yourself continue to grow. The passage of time has helped us develop genuine trust, respect, and love for one another. We've experienced the value of having fellow vets we can call our genuine sisters and brothers. Thank you for listening.
Before I introduce myself, I wanted to invite you to wish our president a happy birthday. He was 39 yesterday. Good reach, Jeff. I'm Ron Keebler, and Vietnam veteran, Army. I started out as a private, and rose to sergeant in a place called LZ Gator, is in the northern part of South Vietnam. And my first poem is about my wife Margot is here with me today, so let me share that. My first poem is called "Where Are You Now, Tom?" And that's Sergeant Tom. He was a Army of the Republic of Vietnam interpreter. So here we go. Are you bleeding in your mind as you rue your family lost? Tried to reunite but could not afford the cost of paying someone to find your family scattered, or telling you they were found but tattered? Did you make it past the Viet Cong and the NVA gauntlet barrier, trying to figure a way to survive the reprisal Harrier? Wonder if you died in the attempt without reuniting, or did you figure a way to get to them and then get safe hiding? Where are you now, as I often wonder, and think about you when we worked the thunder, trying to get VC and NVA to give up their weapons to us, disarm them with money, and send them without a fuss to farm their fields and shoot at no others. Be back in the village as if you were brothers. I hope you survive, and your family too. What a reunion it would be if I were to see you. My next poem is called "Why? No, Why Not?" Positivity in the Fog is the subtitle. The dark side is always present when considering suicide. Why not look at positives to make a bona fide effort to avoid the end of the decision? It does not and should not have to be the entire vision. Widen the speck of light at the end of the tunnel. There is always a way out of any desperate funnel. Head to the open side, not the closing tube, not the closing side. The effort has to be made to think on the positives and put the negatives aside as the dominant expletives. Life is grand and always has rewards for continuing. Just need to subvert all of the winnowing. Step up and be free in a country that defines what freedom can be.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. Thanks all of you for being here also. I'm Monica Blankenship. I was an Air Force nurse for 2 years in the hospital and 5 years flying airbags.
Excuse me, I'm really sorry, I hate to interrupt, but it's so important what you're saying. So I want to make sure people in the back are still, I'm sorry we don't have mics for the people.
No, that's okay. I'll
So
say.
I want to hear you, that's.
Okay.
Okay.
Monica Blankenship. I was an Air Force nurse for 2 years in the hospital, stateside, and then I flew airback for 5 more years, primarily over the Pacific.
Thank you.
I left as a captain. This is entitled Mission, August 2021. Kabul has fallen. Chaos, desperation, terror, death. A graphic picture of a baby being handed over barbed wire to a Marine by a begging mother. Like a gut punch to memory. The babies. April 1975. It's finally over. Saigon has fallen. Frantic, desperate attempts to get out. I'm less than a year in the Air Force, the second lieutenant nurse coming off night shift at Travis Air Force Base. As I'm heading home, my friend and I are told we're being reassigned to AES, the Aerovac Staging Facility, report there the next morning. It made a lot of sense. A lot of troops were coming back in those days. The next morning, there they were, the babies. The littlest from the experience of Saigon in their cardboard box beds, just there. Operation Baby Lift. It began April 4th, 1975, the humanitarian attempt ordered by President Ford to evacuate as many as possible from the frightened, emptying orphanages of Saigon. C-141s and C-5s hauling troops began bringing the children over the Pacific. Those troops holding the children for takeoff and landing, and for many of the long hours, assisting the staff as they could. In AES we worked, bathing, feeding, treating what needed to be treated, holding, comforting. And then these guys, they would come into the unit as they were leaving to say goodbye to their babies, the ones that they had held for all those hours. Little Mai Tai, as she was named by her soldier, smiling in his arms, crying again as he left. The tears those guys tried to hide. My tears watching. Scenes locked in memory. The children, not AP photos, but in my arms. There were many flights in those crazy days of Operation Baby Lift, each with their own story. Over 2,000 orphans were rescued and eventually found new homes. But at least one story needs telling here. The first flight on April 4th, the C-5 that didn't make it to Travis did not even make it to the Philippines. With over 300 on board, it crashed shortly after takeoff when a cargo door burst open at 23,000 feet. 128 died, 78 of them children. I later briefly met the crew director, the medical crew director for that flight, who only survived because she had just left the cargo area. Significantly injured herself, she and others repeatedly crawled back into a burning plane and rice paddy to pull as many out as they could. Indeed, in awe of her. I later was a medical crew director myself, flying those same Pacific routes, always considering the magnitude of what they dealt with. So where does this story go now? Maybe title drama, maybe babies, maybe innocent victims. I don't know. But remembering them, I see again the other victims I worked with in that time. The young troops as patients with their debilitating physical injuries, emotional and psychological trauma that led to enormous substance abuse, loneliness, isolation in their communities and in their lives. Those that could never find normal again. Those that died in our care. The medical staff that tried, fought it with them, that burned out. That's what Kabul brought back to me. Remembering, tears, and questioning a world where it continues to happen. I now have children of my own who have been to Afghanistan, Iraq, Ukraine. An old friend, a Jesuit priest who's been over 50 years in troubled countries, told me once, mothers should run countries. I believe him.
My name's William Ramsey, but I go by the name Pete because somebody might be looking for me somewhere. I'm also an indigenous species of western North Carolina, believe it or not. Couldn't ever tell that by accident. My ancestry through my grandfathers goes back to 1775. Every one of us infantrymen. You think we'd learn another MOS, wouldn't you? Or a better way of doing things. In fact, one of them also fought in the Battle of Culloden in 1745 to kick the British out of Scotland. He didn't succeed then, but he sure did it to them down at Kings Mountain against Tarleton. Thanks to him. I had a little bit of worry about the audience I was going to be facing this afternoon. I've been choosing a piece, but I think the generational thing is going to work just fine. And for those that don't understand what I'm saying, let the elders explain this to you. It's called Don't Worry, Baby. It begins innocently enough. Jeannie and I have stumbled across a Beach Boy Grammy Award tribute show while, get it, are surfing the channels. A brief exchange and select is pushed, and off we go back in time. Listening to the presentations is indeed pulling us back to those dreamlike spaces of intensity and youthful passions, that when you are living it as a teenager, it seems bigger than life itself. Having never lived in the California beach life or culture did not make one immune to the lyrics of idealized adolescent hormones. Dare it be said, California girls were the rage. Bouffant hairdos, wide patent leather belts adorning ever-shortening skirts, and go-go boots. All the above gives rise to risky thoughts fueled by high-octane testosterone. In pursuit, incredible amounts of raw horsepower controlled by acne faces acne faces under swept-back hairdos headed to the sock hopper drive-in diner. Super stock Dodge, 409, Little Deuce Coupe not only rolled out of jukeboxes and dash radios, but they also rolled out of our driveways. The Wilson brothers had the ability to vocalize the emotions of the time while also making the elders reflect on their youth as well. Light-hearted tunes like Little Old Lady from Pasadena, Until Daddy Takes the T-Bird Away. The innocence and naivete of their songs spill across America as a whole, leaving you feeling safe in the notion of both, wouldn't it be nice, and filling you with good vibrations, of course. Jean and I are exchanging comments over how lovely the performance is going when Mr. Blake chooses to knock on my mind's door. I have learned not to ignore these visits. You could say they always seem to address some unreconciled business in squaring innocence from experience from long ago that got stuffed into a duffel bag of the mind. Expediency had demanded it. Like the always worn dog tags you never let go of in order to identify whatever remains might be gathered after combat, those hidden thoughts found a haven as well. Sometimes an unseen tripwire is pulled and bang. Together they compose many and varied strings of memory and chords of emotion tinged with both sunshine and shadow. At first, I am pushing off what is coming together in my thoughts and visions. I want them to go away, while at the same time I am giving them breath in my listening mind. I pause to reveal to Jean my state, as much for my own sake as hers. Somehow, all the smooth and swirling heartfelt visions and memories vibrating through the TV speakers are being, well, I won't say replaced, but rather are morphing into something else. Instead of smooth edges, I am sensing jagged edges. Edges like elephant grass ripping skin and being clipped by bullet rounds. Instead of sweet tonal notes reaching the ear, it is the sound of changing air pressure by those same bullets passing by, while chunks of shrapnel screech through the air and shred the jungle. Mixed in is a cacophonous combination of staccato firing and concussive explosions. Four-part voices reaching for synchronicity are getting overrun by young men calling to each other for help or just making sure they are not alone in the panic of the moment. For some, maybe their last moments. In the early 60s, many of us were just entering our teen years unknowingly and unaware. Many of us would not survive to our 20s. Many young men's minds were set without a solid means of dealing with what awaits them. Sentimentality can prove lethal, it seems. Looking at a life presented in such romantic tones and whispers, which later turns out to be vacuous and empty gesture, is corrupting. The corruption intensifies with time and leaves the residue of unsought memories, images and sounds in the mind. I guess for me, what gets triggered is a tragically learned awareness of just how cruel life can fall on some and not others. How about these guys on the screen? Did any of them or their buds become part of that arising turmoil? Or were their lives just surfing USA? Their music fell on many different ears throughout the mid-60s and onwards. The Beach Boys are not guilty of anything. Gene and I still love the music. Do I harbor jealousy? Probably. So what is happening? Is this a flashback or a psychotic revisit to my Vietnam experience? Putting this episode in perspective might go like this. For a moment, I am communing with both the dead, who never survived their innocence, and their living brethren. Both groups came to know their songs of experience left their minds undistorted and shorn the assurances of, don't worry, baby, everything's going to be all right.
Mainly because I'm processing all of your readings, and it's a lot. So, and I don't think Ron or Steve believed me when I said I was coming, because normally when I read, there's a guy with a hook over there, and paramedics at the door for when I faint. So, my name is Kevin Wehrman, and I'm MM1 SS SCW NCW extraordinaire. Extraordinaire, I added. The MM is Machinist Mate First Class, Submarine Service, CV Combat Warfare, and Navy Coastal Warfare. And I got just a little brief. I did cut it, Ron.
We get a break before
I have tiny bladder, so we will get a break. Those of you who've heard me speak already know that I'm extremely nervous and really do not enjoy doing this. Those who've not heard me before probably already recognize this fact. But I want to start by thanking Ron for unintentionally changing my life. He sent me an email informing me of this event and then queried, I wondered if you would be willing to read one of your stories. And then added the familiar caveat, just no more than 5 minutes. Upon hours of reflection, I was struck with this incredible revelation that he said, one of my stories. Imagine my relief, as for the past several years, I've been writing while thinking that I was being asked to task writing my life story in 5 minutes, or less. And not to boast, but at almost 60, in over 16 years of military service, 40 years of marriage, raising 2 children from birth, adopting a teenager, assisting in the placement of over 700 Russian orphans with American families, a grandfather to 4, foster parent to dozens of various critters, along with a handful of other somewhat significant events. I would like to think I have a bit more to talk about that can fit into 5 minutes or less. But being that he was asking for only one story, that changed everything. I thought maybe I could pull this off once. At least it seemed a bit easier. Not easy, mind you, but easier. Anyone who's known me for 5 minutes or less will tell you that I can't describe putting on my compression socks in 5 minutes or less. Anyway, here it goes. And yeah, thanks, Ron. By the way, you can relax. I'm not going to talk about my compression socks. Note to self, brief pause for thunderous ovation. I wasn't supposed to say that. Rather, I'm going to start with music. I love music, kind of like Pete there. Where'd you go? But almost all music. But the lyrics are what really grab me, because words are what the stuff of what life is made of. So here are some words in music. Does anyone remember Eddie and the Cruiser? That's another story. Note to self, okay, stay on track. Oops, I wasn't supposed to read that part either. Anyway, the words in music to what I was listening to was, I'm older than I'm used to be and younger than I'm gonna be, and fewer things puzzle me than when I was young. But when my pace is getting slack, I catch myself thinking back to a certain summer night is long gone. And boom, there I was back in Russia, October 1998. My first trip to facilitate the adoption of Russian children. A few years prior, I was a submariner on a boomer. My job was to help ensure the nuclear propulsion plant got us where we needed to be. So when the Russians initiated the first strike, our job was to ensure that no Russians lived to brag about it. Kostya, my guide, was a lieutenant colonel in the Russian army, the anti-aircraft division. His unit's job was to shoot down the American bombers that would be arriving soon, not today, probably tomorrow. As you might imagine, our first meeting was a tad tense. As the hours passed, the vodka flowed, we began to talk. We had absolutely nothing in common but our love for those children. We found that we shared more than either of us could have imagined. We spoke of our childhoods. I recall hiding under my desk in grade school because we had to practice for the day the Russians would nuke us. He remembered hiding under his desk in grade school because they had to be prepared for the day the American bombers would come. After many hours, over the next couple days, with many laughs and many tears, we discovered we had everything in common that held any real value. For any math nerds, we had boiled it down to the least common denominator: Russians and Americans, the peoples, not the governments, wanted precisely the same thing. We all want our children to be safe, to be healthy, to be happy, to have a better chance at a better life than we had. So in a matter of days, we who were once bitter enemies, poised to annihilate each other, became like brothers. And we sang the best we could, he in Russian and I in English, the words of the German rockers, the Scorpions, Wind of Change. Yes, words and music. If we can agree that everyone's primary objective is essentially the same, how can we explain that we continuously fail to live like we believe it? By the mercy and grace of God, we are all younger than we are going to be. But life is short. Live it well. Thanks for listening and be safe.
bear with me, I have a dry mouth as a result of throat cancer, attributed to Agent Orange. So, I drink a lot. Good afternoon. My name is Carl Zipper. I served in the U.S. Army from May 1969 to July 1971. I arrived in Vietnam on July the 7th, 1970, as a warrant officer, aviator, helicopter pilot. In Vietnam, I was known as Zippo, Magnet Ass, and call sign Minuteman 27. Lamson 719. Most of you here today have never heard of Lamson 719. Can I see a show of hands of anyone who has heard of Lamson 719? There you go. Operation Lamson 719 was a limited objective offensive campaign conducted in the southeast portion of Laos. The armed forces of South Vietnam carried out the campaign during the Vietnam War between 8 February and 25 March 1971. The United States provided logistical, aerial, and artillery support for the operation, but its ground forces were prohibited by law from entering Laotian territory. We would just disregard all the special forces that had been there the whole time. The campaign aimed to disrupt a possible future offensive by the North Vietnamese army using a logistical system within Laos known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail. During the two-month operation, American helicopters flew more than 160,000 sorties. The U.S. Army lost 108 helicopters destroyed and another 618 damaged. 20% of those helicopters were so badly damaged that they were not expected to fly again. One of those helicopters destroyed belonged to my unit. It was shot down from 5,000 feet. I will always remember March 22nd, 1971. On that day, we lost my best friend, Aircraft Commander Reginald David Cleavey. He had 46 days left in Vietnam. John Grove Traver III, pilot, one of our best. He had been in Vietnam about 3 months. Walter Ray Hall, gunner. He had just extended for another 6 months in Vietnam. And we lost my good friend and crew chief, Donald Paul Knutson, who only had about 3 months left in the Army. We were asked to write about if you were an enlisted man, an association you had a friendship with an officer. Or if you were an officer, a friendship with an enlisted man, because these sort of things were against the rules, fraternization. So I chose to write about Don Knutson. Ode to Donald. We met on the flight line because you crewed 239. We flew together, you and I, and we did just fine. Old 239 went home. Now 759 was your baby. We carried heavier loads, and we never said maybe. Can we get in there? It looks so tight. I just waited to hear clear down left, clear down on the right. Our jobs weren't easy, nor were they fun, although they would have been if we weren't catching rounds from a gun. We were young, but always ready, for you and I had to stay steady. We might take fire at any place. Now tears trickle down my face. We became good friends in a very short time, where days seemed like years, and years became a lifetime. We spent hours together, just you and I. We became friends on the ground and a combat crew in the sky. You came from Germany with just 6 months to go. Who would do that to you? Just why? Did you know? He would teach you a lesson, try to make you a man, so he ordered you off and away to Vietnam. We were young, but always ready, for you and I had to stay steady. We might take fire at any place. Now tears still trickle down my face. Then, Don, you flew where I didn't go. It was Lamson 719. I was recovering, you know. On missions that seemed hopeless in thick smoke and haze, it was late March during those final crazy days. Our losses were great up above Route 9. 108 choppers lost in such a short time. 72 aviators were lost when the enemy hugged friendly bases. Our hearts were so heavy for 72 ever young faces. Of the crew members who died, with 11 men not found, your ship's crew of 4 never homeward bound. We were young, but always ready, for you and I had to stay steady. You fell down on fire at that far-off place. Now tears still trickle down my face.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Thomas. This is my first public reading. Steve decided to put me last, so we're going to find out together if that was a good choice. I didn't give much thought into how I was going to introduce myself, so here we go. Like I said, my name is Thomas. Almost exactly a year ago, on October 2nd, I stepped foot on also I'm not crying. So it should be fun. I stepped foot on the VA as a patient seeking mental health care for the first time. Almost exactly a year ago, 55 weeks ago, probably. The only other time I'd been on that VA campus and any VA campus was to take my battle buddy to the ER who happened to be a Marine. So I have a very well-standing love-hate relationship with the Marines, all the way back to my first deployment. Since then, I was joking with Pete that I would just call myself a holic. I wasn't a workaholic, I was an alcoholic, I just, whatever it was, good, bad, ugly, stupid, I probably tried it in some form or fashion. But so since about 55 weeks ago, my family's had to leave the house a few times. My wife's found with a pistol in bed. And then in January, I joined a group called Moral Injury. Because for some reason, I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. On paper, I was really successful. I was high-functioning. I was a high-functioning holic of many types. And PTSD just didn't really describe me very well. Yeah, I jumped like a proverbial small child at surprises and loud noises. I've had a coworker think I was going to kill them. After the 5th time, they thought it was funny to scare me. And I told them not to, so I don't feel too bad about it. You know who you are. We're still great friends to this day. But PTSD just never really described me. And then for the first time, I talked to Dr. Yeck and her team, Chaplain Jeremiah, many members of this team behind me have been through it as well. And moral injury just really described what was going on with me. So that was January. It was January 7th. I actually had to zoom into it because I was at an offsite for a senior leadership event with my job. By the time that group ended, I resigned from that position because personal and professional issues continued to escalate, I guess, if you want to put it as simply as possible. And I just knew I was not doing things the Lord called me to do. As I was improving my mental health, my spiritual health really had a revival. And the Lord opened my eyes that you gotta do something different, Thomas. So I'm here today. On paper, not much better. I would say most people probably argue worse than I was a year ago, but that's only on paper. So I guess the difference now is I really don't care what is on the paper. I know where I'm at, I know where the Lord's leading me and where my spirit is, and I also acknowledge that I have a passion that sometimes comes out negatively and strongly, but at the end of the day, if the worst I get labeled as is he really cared, I'll take that.
We love you.
Thank you. All that said, that was kind of off the cuff. So I was going to read a letter I wrote to myself as part of that moral injury group. I read it as part of the group. I read an excerpt of it at the final ceremony, which Steve heard, and so this is my first time reading it publicly. And the assignment was basically to write to any time in your former life. Thomas, I know it might seem strange reading a letter from your older self. Let me turn this way a bit more. But don't do what you normally do and think too much into it. Disregard all the nerdy stuff you've read or watched about temporal paradoxes and dismiss your concerns about irrevocably changing the future for the bad or tearing a hole in the four-dimensional fabric of space-time and causing the end of the universe as you know. Trust me. To start writing this, I had to do the same. As long as I don't start dissolving into the ether as I write this, I will assume it all works out in the end, and like Oedipus, we will follow our fate and path regardless of this intercession. This is merely an organized, hopefully at least somewhat, and proofread stream of consciousness, but I do promise you there are points that I will get to. Just read the words, think about what they mean to you now, and how that meaning can change and evolve over time and through varying life experiences. You've always been a thoughtful person, and so far you remain as such for the good or the bad. If everything worked as I hoped, this should arrive to you full of piss and vinegar before you ship off the basic. You haven't heard that expression yet, but don't worry, you will a few times in the future. You also hear several about the sweet smell of Similac, being wet behind the ears, officers only run under two conditions while under fire conducting physical training, or the one that has impacted and shaped your life more significantly than the others. You are responsible for everything that does and does not happen under your command. I would tell you, don't worry, you got this, but I know you are nervous, so I won't waste the time, although I guess I just wasted even more. To continue with the motifs and cliches, number one, today is the first day of the rest of your life. It's true. Even though it seems like you have plenty of time ahead of you, you will want some of these days back, or wish you had appreciated them more. But you can't, and at least to this day, no one has figured it out. If they have, they ain't saying. Number two, give it 110%. You're right, it's impossible. Give 100% when and where you determine you need to. Do not try to sustain 100%. You can, but you are pretty damn good at cruising at 90% throttle. Develop the ability and discernment to transition quickly, not only up, but maybe more importantly, also down. Really think about the whens and wheres and whos. Some of them may not pass final review. And you'll realize it shouldn't be correlated to when you are off work. Number three, time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't. Healing heals all wounds. But it does take time to understand and discover what that is and means. It also takes time for that process to occur. And I would argue it never really ends. Unfortunately, this one is more in line with why I'm writing to you in the first place. It takes action to heal a wound. Time merely fills the voids and holds the scar tissue, not functional, healthy tissue that can support items 1 and 2 above. For a point of reference, as I'm writing this, you are coming up on your 10-year anniversary of being out of the Army. I don't want to spoil too much for you, but I will tell you that you exited the Army on July 4th, 2013, and I'm writing this to you in April 2023. It's hard to believe that's been nearly 10 years, almost twice the duration of your active service, and longer still than your combined time at West Point and the Army. Maybe that is just my realization that I'm getting older, over twice as old as you are now. I've lived more life from this moment where you are reading this letter than you have leading up to it. And that's just in terms of the actual passing of time on this earth, not the actual life you've experienced and built for you and your family. No spoiler alert, but yes, you have a family. A beautiful one you don't deserve, and not what you had envisioned necessarily, but you won't change a thing. You know what I mean when you get there. I do remember you being more nervous about whether you'd go bald. Now I gotta put some humor in there. Funny enough, a West Point barber will inform you that she conducted her own scientific study and concluded that if you make it past the age of 35 without starting to lose your hair, you're probably in the clear. Please inform you that you've made it 2 years past that phase line. And I can honestly say that you haven't lost any hair. You have a few grays that you don't care about, and a few more of your pounds you're working on as well. Your father and your brother do as well. So maybe the bat barber was onto something. All right. Depending on how you count, considering that I am now 7 paragraphs into writing this letter and I haven't really addressed the original premise, I will try to tame this stream, which may actually be a river, and channel its meandering to its mouth into the greater body of water that is my reason for this letter. You've always been a fast learner and able to adapt and recover from things life has thrown at you, at least on the exterior. The problem is that the facade of the exterior usually has load-bearing walls right behind it, which carry the load of life and protect and support everything within. I'm not going to spoil anything for you. I'm not going to prevent you from experiencing your life just as I did. One new unknown moment at a time. The last thing I want to do is lessen the significance or impact these experiences will have on you, your life, or those you've loved along the way. And you'll know when you get there. It's a solemn word. But I don't think we released yet. Like the stream that got me to this point in this letter, life meanders through twists and turns and sometimes doubles back on itself. Through the almost 20-year journey from where you are to where I am and where we are going, there have been a few things that have taken you longer to learn or been harder to accept, or we just simply took for granted. These are what I want to address and share with you and are part of this letter. These will not drastically change your life direction, open a wormhole to a parallel universe, or everything else I just mentioned. You will not win the lottery, but maybe you will be a better man. I am fairly confident they will at least improve the quality of your life and those of the people in your life. They may prevent you from experiencing some pain, but not all, and that is not my intention either. It is through that pain and the processing and healing that you will grow the most. And the hottest fires are forged the strongest steels. More importantly, it may also prevent you from causing additional pain to yourself or your ultimate goal of people you love around you. This is at least my goal going forward for however long our river of life flows. Number 1, grace is for everyone, including yourself. This one took us a while. I'm not sure if it's stubbornness or cognitive ability to wrap our mind around the true meaning of grace, but we still battle every day to feel that this is true. At least now we know that it is true, even when we don't feel it. It's a start, and we may never truly feel it because we know we don't deserve it, but we have to accept it. Otherwise, every mistake or stumbling block we come across in our life will tear us down, prevent us from moving forward, and cause further pain and more than just our own life. Number 2, it's okay to be weak. You are being stronger and helping more people than you realize when you are. They, meaning our therapists, don't like it when I call it weakness, and they're right. It's not weakness, but that's what I call it. Show me a man that can admit he has a problem or is struggling. Show me a leader who asks for help and actively seeks it. Or show me a father who knows he is teaching his children much more about strength through his actions rather than merely his words. And I will show you strength. One day you will realize you have helped more than yourself by demonstrating this, and I hope that it is many more going forward. Number 3, do not underestimate the significance or take for granted the value of time and fellowship. This may seem fairly obvious, but we often disregard the importance of relationships in our lives. This does not only apply to our literal family, it also applies to our figurative and spiritual brothers and sisters. You cannot live life on your own, and you do not want to be the only person manning a gun when contact is made. As iron sharpens iron, so shall one man sharpen another. Chew on those for a while. Only took me 37 years, but I hope gave you a head start. They're all related and connected, intertwined and complex, very similar to life. I know you are young, dumb, and full of it, but I hope you take the time to read these words more than once. Save them, pull them out when you feel burdened, weary or downtrodden. And I bet if you make action to those words, things will begin to improve. The situation may not immediately, but your outlook and mental state will. Contemplate these as your life changes, as you grow and develop, and most importantly, live them in all that you do. Teach them to everyone you can, and never quit. I can promise you that I will do the same. Stay humble and hungry. You're older and slightly more gray self.